Okay, so, as implied by the title, this lecture will be a response or addition to J.L. Austin's first lecture in his series, How to Do Things with Words. In this collection of spoken lectures performed between 1955 and 1962, he criticizes the then modern linguistic statement by defining communications as systems of acts made of components he expounds as performatives. Austin had a particular disdain for inauthenticity, as noted by the officious understudy in his theatrical metaphor for the persona. By refusing to cast the understudy in his theory, his taxonomy lacks space for a performative subtext or irony. He determines an act's performative value on a set of characteristics, the first of which being that it is a statement that directly and instantly conducts an action. This is not limited to physical manifestations, but he exemplifies this notion with the instance of marriage following an I do. However, silence or horrific laughter would also have equally conspicuous consequences under such tense affairs. Action can be described as any effect to any degree resulting from a performative utterance. In Austin's theory, the performative is dependent upon the appropriate context as indicated by society's currently accepted conventional networks. However, due to major shifts in contemporary transmissions, humanity would be post-convention in the eyes of our predecessors. Such contexts now predominantly depend on the demographic you identify with or your personalized algorithms have associated you with. To continue with Austin's example, weddings may now exist as radical praxis. For instance, New Age hippies may get married in the center of a nudist drum circle, even with the addition of a canine first man. What can be considered a spouse has also been challenged to extreme degrees. People may now wed a cardboard cutout of Robert Pattinson, a dog, a zombie doll, a pastel goth polyamorous assembly, or a virtual reality anime character. The legal aspects of marriage have lost their importance in the eyes of many, largely due to same-sex marriage, which wasn't federally protected in the United States until 2015 and is still illegal in numerous countries. To many, a more correct indicator of a marriage's legitimacy is the acceptance of their peers. Because of internet distribution, there are populations the size of cities who recognize and accept these contexts as permissible weddings, and therefore they are. This acceptance spreads way farther than it would have in the days of J.L. Austin, when more than likely the marriage would only be recognized by people the spouses had direct contact with. Austin's final criterion of performative is that it must be activated by the correct person. This notion has been confronted by anti-individual identities who can also create units of effect, namely algorithms, networks, and artificial intelligence, which have proven themselves to have comparable degrees of consciousness to the previously considered conventional human form, one body. This series strives to correct Austin's fault, his ignorance of irony or inauthenticity existing as a performative act, and his naive belief or goal of achieving the truth, which time has proven to be a farce. The utterance is rather a mimetic unit which cannot exist in a vacuum and bonds to other units within its proximity in a network of other truths and performatives. Internet memes and cultures provide us with a more comprehensive representation of the nature of ever-present networks, undulations, and cycles. They describe how one unit within a network can push the pendulum of interest and taste from one demographic to another. Humor was once judged against its popularity and the passage of time, but we have come to understand that it works more as a trend cycle. A meme is typically conceived by a chronically online anonymous poster, trickles down into the mainstream, and then becomes cancer, but over time it shall complete the cycle, becoming humorous once again. This cycle is catalyzed by postmodernist media practices and enabled by modern consumption habits. Such applications are characterized by compounded reproduction, which in time will greatly abstract the original meaning. Memes have become memes about memes, which have allowed for memes about memes about memes, and memes about memes about memes about memes, and so forth. Internet humor has quickly evolved from irony to post-irony, and then to post-post-irony or meta-irony. In an instance where a meme is meta-ironic, the joke has become so far removed from the original that it becomes literal. Similarly, what was once considered bad, mismatched gimmicky fashion is now the famous ketamine chic, and yet somehow within the same demographic, so-called normcore or trad fashion can be esteemed simultaneously, when 5 years ago having your fashion described as basic would have been an insult. Many have concluded that these styles are the result of impossibly fast cycle trends, and the youth is failing to comply with such materialist concerns. Though it still relies on consumerism, no one trend is indeed considered fashionable at a given instance because the cycles have folded in on themselves. Both ketamine chic and normcore are based in ironic beauty. What is considered fashionable is perceived effortlessness. Of course, it is not a true lack thereof, but a disconnect, a theoretical lack of self-awareness that allows for the individual to look attractive ironically. This phenomenon is generally attributed to internet-caused nihilism. This is the Instagram account of a man with nepotistic ties to the entertainment and fashion industries. He is a New York City local, commonly referred to as the Carpet Guy, or likewise nicknames, who is publicly known for having a fetish, the urge to be stepped on by attractive young women. His name originates from his older practice of disguising himself in a rolled carpet, which he would orient on the city's sidewalks, and then wait for non-consenting passerbys to walk over him. He has gained a small but significant following in the past year, which has seemingly allowed him to give up the carpet. This is attributed to the dime square type micro-influencers who agree to do photo shoots with him so that he will promote their branded personas. This act is trending as a result of meta-ironic humor, where influencers are making a joke by giving him exactly what he wants. This extreme literalism grants him the freedom to openly express his perversion in the public eye. Mimetic cycles are now so quick, the formula so well understood, and visual literacy so high, that the funny is unfunny, the unfunny is funny, the unfunny is unfunny, and the funny is funny simultaneously. So-called truth, humor, and interest are dependent on your mimetic geography, and therefore the performative value of an act is dependent on your demographic sync. We are only beginning to understand the implications that accelerating trend cycles in combination with meta-irony will have for contemporary cultural outputs. Now I will introduce even more egregious instances of such production. During the 2016 election, the alt-right engaged in a so-called meme war, which was likely successful in boosting the awareness of, and therefore the popularity of, Donald Trump. Participants created numerous memes with the intent of directing widespread subconscious control. Such memes were shared by members of the political right and left alike, and he was successfully reduced into a symbol, a humorous caricature and an icon of white supremacy just before his election in 2016. In this instance, among others, the alt-right engaged in ironic magical practices which became real magical practices through the guise of meta-ironic humor. Perhaps you remember the Ebola memes of 2014 and later. This was an extremely widespread phenomenon, contacting nearly every online demographic and certainly spread across all social media platforms. It was born from an insidious alt-right origin, the Ebola-chan meme, an anthropomorphic anime incarnation of the virus. It was conceived during a devastating outbreak in West Africa in order to achieve a white supremacist goal. It was a conscious attempt to use a mimetic form of chaos magic to encourage a pandemic and make the global population whiter. People engaging in this meme were either consciously or unconsciously participating in the creation of an egregore, which some believe was powerful enough to later take the form of the coronavirus pandemic. More recently, the alt-right has been spreading memes conspiring mass shootings at Pride events. Such images were perhaps directly or indirectly responsible for episodes of mass hysteria which occurred during the New York City and San Francisco 2022 Pride events, where crowds turned into stampedes fleeing phantom shooters. Since the 2020 protests following the murder of George Floyd, there was a spike in combative, esoteric management within the political left. Though many participants were not yet self-aware of their position in the chaos media war, this could be evidence of the pendulum of mimetic magical interest, notions of occult justice swinging in the direction of the left, a demographic which has generally rejected religious thought in such contexts years prior. To understand the value of a performative act is to have conscious knowledge of mimetic egregores, whether in a metaphorical, literal, or meta-ironic sense, to correctly distinguish the ebb and flow of orgone or interest through time and demographics. So now we will have time for a quick Q&A. If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself.
So, did all those bad things, actually happen because of a magical act?
It is likely not correlation without causation, though not necessarily enacted through mythical truths. The individual worker or poster, meaning a single unit of the societal network, may have infiltrated the collective consciousness enough to allow a mass subconscious effect. But maybe not. All we know for sure is that these things happened. Are there any other questions? Thank you for your time today. I hope you all gained something and are interested in attending my next lecture. Goodbye.